Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. In the land of Ivalice, there's a scholar named Ivalice who's been studying the history of the land around a time known as the Lion War. The people say the war divided the land in two, as two sides fought to determine who would become the new king, but it all got sorted out by a lone hero named Delilah. That's the official story, but Al-Islam isn't sure that's the truth. He believes the true hero of the Lion War was Ramza, the youngest son of the Beowulf noble house, who for reasons unknown was scrubbed from history. Recently, the derived papers that had been sealed away by the church were released, and they say it was Ramza who really put an end to the war, despite the fact that the church has him labeled as a blasphemer and one of the most evil men to ever walk the planet. Al-Islam wants to know the truth, so he dives into the derived papers to learn the true story of the Lion War. A year after the end of the 50-year war, the king died of an illness, and his successor was only 2 years old. He's obviously too young to rule, so his guardian will be the one to take over for him. The queen's older brother Lard got the job, but the parliament figured that the queen would use her brother as a means of ruling herself, so they blocked his appointment to the role of the king's guardian and instead gave the job to the king's cousin Gautana. Both Lard and Gautana are highly decorated generals from the 50-year war, but they had support from two different groups of people. Gautana had the support of the high-ranking nobles, but the disenfranchised nobles and soldiers preferred Lard. Gautana's symbol is the black lion, while Lard's symbol is the white, and the fight between the two of them over the throne will eventually be known as the Lion War. Over at the Orban Monastery, Agrias Oaks has hired a group of mercenaries led by a man named Gafgarian to help protect Princess Ovelia when she leaves the place. One of these mercenaries is Ramza, the main character of this story, but before they can get their journey started, an injured knight comes stumbling in saying that Prince Gautana's men are there. Agrias and her knights head out to deal with them, and even though Ramza stopped being a knight a long time ago, he heads out to help them. Gafgarian joins in too, but he plans on asking for more money for the work. Gautana's men are there to kidnap the princess, so Ramza and the others do the one thing that they can in that situation, and that's put them all down. Unfortunately, while they're fighting at the front, a knight sneaks around the back, knocks the princess unconscious, tosses her on a chocobo, and rides off before Agrias can stop him. The knight who snatched her was Delilah, Ramza's friend from a long time ago who he thought was dead. Since Ramza knows the man who took Ovelia, Agrias wants to know all that she can about him so it will be a little bit easier to track him down. So Ramza tells her a very long story. When Ramza was younger, he and his best friend Delilah were both knight cadets. The world had been at war for 50 years, and after it ended, the soldiers who came home didn't have jobs or money, and because of that, they didn't really have any loyalty to the ruling class. A lot of them became thieves and started plotting a rebellion against the royal family. Ivalice stopped being a safe place to be, which meant every night, even the cadets, were forced to deal with criminals. At the academy, all of the cadets get called into a meeting, and Delilah is pretty sure something big is about to happen since both Prince Larg and Marquis Elmdor of Limberry are coming to town for some reason. The Hokuta Knights are on high alert since everywhere is pretty dangerous, but they don't have enough troops to deal with everything, which is why Delilah is pretty sure that he and Ramza and the rest of the cadets are about to get a mission. Sure enough, their commander comes in saying just that. The Death Corps has it out for the royal family, so the cadets have been ordered to hunt them down and deal with them. Prince Larg's knights are at Egros Castle not too far away from the academy, so they'll be helping too, as well as anyone else that can be spared. The main job of Ramza and the other rookies is to get to Egros Castle and help guard it from the attack that is likely gonna happen. But first, there are some thieves that have been seen sneaking into town, and the cadets are sent out to get rid of them. Once the thieves have been dealt with, Ramza, Delilah, and the other cadets make their way to Egros. On the way there, they see a man named Algus being attacked by some members of the Death Corps, who are trying to find information on Marquis Elmdor. Since they're supposed to be dealing with the Death Corps anyway, Ramza and his group save Algus by putting them down. Algus is a knight cadet from Limberry, and when he realizes that Ramza is a part of the Beowulf family, he gets excited because Ramza's family is one of the most powerful noble houses around, and they will have the resources to help him save the Marquis. The man's been kidnapped by the Death Corps, and Algus thinks they're gonna kill him. Delilah highly doubts that the Death Corps kidnapped such a high-ranking noble just to kill him. Even if they were, there isn't a whole lot that Ramza can do about it anyway. So instead of running off blindly, they head to Egros Castle to get their new orders. Ramza's brother Dicedarg is in charge of Egros, and he's already heard about the kidnapping. He has Ramza's other brother Zalbag leading a search party to hunt the man down, and he's pretty sure that if they haven't already killed Elmdor, the Death Corps will be sending out some ransom demands soon. Algus wants Dice Dog to give him some soldiers so he can get revenge on the Death Corps for killing his friends, but there's no way anyone would give a low-ranking soldier an army to lead, so instead Dice Dog assigns them all to guard Igros. He doesn't think the fighting will reach the castle, but you never know. Algus isn't happy with the assignment, but there's nothing he can do about it. In the old days, his family had as much pull as the Beowulfs, but his grandpa got captured during the 50-Year War and sold his friends out to save himself. Nobody looks highly on people who do that, so nobody batted an eye when a rookie soldier stabbed him in the back. One of his grandpa's friends escaped captivity and told everyone about it, which caused his family to lose all of their political clout. Hanging around the castle is boring, but it does give Ramses' sister Alma a chance to see him. Tata, Delita's sister, is there too, so she finally gets to catch up with her brother. She and Alma are in school together, but even though she tries to hide it from Delita, since she's not nobly born, they don't exactly treat her well. Zalbag is still around the castle too, but before he heads off to continue his duties, he lets Rams and the others know that the Death Corps have demanded a ransom for Elmdor. The whole thing doesn't make sense to him because the Death Corps seems to have bigger goals than just kidnapping nobles for money. He sent a spy out to watch some members of their group, but he hasn't come back yet. Zalbag is pretty sure he's in trouble, but the higher-up nobles don't think there's any reason to search for him. He'd been sent to the trade city of Dorda to the east, and while he wants to send some people out after him, he can't officially go against orders. But since it's not like Rams and the cadets are doing anything productive around the castle, he indirectly sends them to Dorda to look for his missing man. When they reach the city, they see Wigraf, the leader of the Death Corps, brutally interrogating one of his own men. He apparently had no idea that one of his underlings, a man named Gustav, had kidnapped the Marquis, and he wants to know where he took him. When the guy realizes that Wigraf is going to kill him, he spills the beans. Wigraf was going to kill the man anyway for what he did, but when Rams and the others spot him, he decides to leave before he gets captured. There are a few more members of the Death Corps there that Rams' crew puts down, but they do capture the same guy that Wigraf had questioned. Algus interrogates him in a much more brutal way than Wigraf had, since he's not all that fond of commoners. The Death Corps members do have a legitimate grievance though. They fought in the 50-Year War, but once it was over, they were left to fend for themselves, all because they weren't nobly born. Delita can sympathize since he's not a noble either, but none of them can really agree with kidnapping people regardless of the situation. If the Death Corps is okay with that, then they kind of lose the moral argument. That's why Wigraf never agreed to snatch Elmdor. Gustav is one of Wigraf's top-ranking officers, and he had a different idea about how things should be run, and Wigraf's gone to deal with him. He's hiding in the desert to the north of Dorda, and he probably has the Marquis with him, so Rams and the others head off to save him. They fight their way inside of the hideout right as Wigraf kills Gustav for what he did. Wigraf is perfectly fine with them taking the Marquis back to Igros if they let him leave without a fight. Algus doesn't want to, but Rams and Delita are pretty sure that even if they can beat Wigraf, he will likely make sure the Marquis dies in the fight, so they let him go and take Elmdor back to Igros Castle, where they will very likely get in trouble for disobeying orders, despite the fact that their mission was a success. Rams' brother was not happy about the fact that Rams and Delita went after Elmdor against his orders. Having his own family members disobey orders is not something that helps with keeping the regular soldiers respecting the chain of command. Dice Dark's not all that willing to forgive Rams' insubordination either, but since his actions helped save Elmdor, Prince Larg is willing to let it go. The mission of dealing with the Death Corps is nearly finished, and since Ramses seems dead set on putting himself in the forefront of it one way or another, Dice Dark decides to let him, Delita, and Algus join one of the more important tasks. They found a few places where Death Corps members are hiding, and Dice Dark is willing to let Ramses' group choose which one of them to attack. They head off to do just that while Dice Dark and Larg talk about why he was really upset about Ramses' interference. Gustav was one of Larg's men, so Dice Dark thought he'd be upset over Ramses messing up one of his plans, but it turned out better than what Larg had originally wanted. He had been trying to get Elmdor's people to work with him, and having Dice Dark's brother rescue the man should work wonders for having him get brought over to his side. Dice Dark is pretty sure the king will be dead soon, so they need to get their plans organized fast so they can capitalize on what will happen when the king croaks. Ramses' group just so happens to attack the base where Maluda, Wigraf's sister, is held up. She tries to explain that the Death Corps just wants the nobles to stop treating them like animals, but Algus makes it pretty clear that he sees the poor as nothing more than trash, and they don't deserve equal treatment. The guy is a total prick, but neither Ramses nor Delita agree with his way of thinking, and they let Maluda go. While they were out, the Death Corps launches an attack on Igros. They injure Dice Dark pretty badly and kidnap Delita's sister. They tried to snatch Alma too, but Zalbag managed to save her before she could get taken. When Delilah hears about what happened to his sister, he does not take it well, but Dice Dog makes it clear that when Zalbag finds the place where the Death Corps is held up, they won't attack it until they get Tata back. Algus is pretty sure that Dice Dog is lying, since no one with any sense would waste troops trying to save a commoner. That rightfully makes Delilah punch him in the face. Algus doesn't really care if what he said made a commoner mad, since no matter how Delilah feels about it, he'll never be the same as Ramza. The two can play at being friends all they want, but the difference in class makes that impossible. Ramza doesn't agree, and he tells Algus to leave before he decides to put hands on the man too. He does leave, but not before he lets Ramza know that his brothers have found the Death Corps' base. It's at a place called Fort Zeekton, and they're getting ready to attack it. Going at the place from the front is a good way to die, so he suggests that Ramza attacks it from the rear if he wants to save the little commoner girl. Ramza tells Delilah where Tata likely is, and the two of them grab their squad and head off to rescue her. On the way there, they run into Maluta and some of her people while they're trying to escape. Delilah wants her to tell him where Weegrif took his sister just in case he didn't take her to the fort, and she assumes that Tata was a part of the Bayol family. When she finds out that she's not, it doesn't change the fact that she was hanging around with the nobles who have oppressed them, so she refuses to tell Delilah where her brother went, and she refuses to stop fighting until they kill her. At one of the Death Corps' safe houses nearby, Weegrif confronts the guy who kidnapped Tata because he wants to know why he's abducting people. Golagros claims that he took her as a hostage so he could escape Egros, but if that were true, Weegrif wants to know why he hasn't let the girl go yet. It's starting to seem like Gustav 2.0, which means Weegrif is about to kill another one of his men who have gone rogue, but Golagros points out that they've lost most of their men, and they're surrounded by Hokutan Knights. Keeping the Beowulf girl may be their only way to escape. Escaping doesn't matter to Weegrif since he knows that they'll be caught and executed eventually. They just have to do as much damage as they can and drag as many of their enemies along with them to the grave. That way their children can have a better life, and he's pretty sure that there are survivors at Fort Zeekton that can help them get back on the offensive. A messenger comes in letting him know that his sister has gotten killed, and the people who did it will be there soon. So he tells Golagros and the others to leave Tata there and head to Fort Zeekton. That way they can get their defenses ready while he delays the invaders. Golagros leaves, but he takes Tata with him as insurance. Weegrif is surprised that some cadets managed to kill his sister, but regardless he has to kill them to avenge her. He does think it's kind of funny that Golagros kidnapped the wrong girl, but he makes it clear that if they want the girl back, they'll have to beat him. He's surprised that he can't overpower a group of cadets, but he refuses to die there. Before he leaves, he lets Ramza know that Dice Dog had Gustav kidnap the Marquis, and it's likely Zalbag knew about it. Ramza doesn't believe it, but both Larg and Goltana are fighting to get support for their claim to the throne, so the easiest way to get it is to remove the people in power and replace them with people you can control. Dice Dog tricked Gustav into kidnapping the Marquis, and they were probably going to kill him if Ramza hadn't interfered. Ramza still doesn't believe him, but Weegrif is pretty sure he'll see the truth about his brothers eventually. Delilah doesn't care about any of that political stuff, he just wants his sister back, but unfortunately Golagros didn't listen to Weegrif and he took Tata with him, which means they have to go to Fort Zeekton. When they get there, Zalbag and his troops are already there with Algus. Golagros has Tata and is trying to use her to make Zalbag and the others leave him alone. That and the fact that the fort is full of enough explosive powder to turn them and the entire building to ash. Proving that what Algus said about Ramza's brothers was true, Zalbag tells Algus to shoot Tata so he can kill Golagros. Algus is completely okay with shooting the woman right in front of her brother. Golagros manages to crawl into the fort to keep from getting shot again, and after news comes that Weegrif and about 50 soldiers have been spotted nearby, Zalbag leaves Algus to finish taking care of the fort as well as dealing with Ramza and Delilah. Delilah and Ramza do the world a favor and kill Algus, but while Delilah is checking on Tata to see if she's still alive, Golagros lights the powder that's in the fort and causes it to explode. Ramza gets separated from Delilah and his sister by the explosions, and since there's nothing he can do, he runs away. After hearing the story, Agrias is ready to go after Delilah since she wouldn't be able to face the royal family if she failed to protect the princess. And even though Gafgarian refuses to help hunt for Ovelia since he hasn't been paid to do that, Ramza agrees to go so he can find out how Delilah survived the explosion and why he kidnapped the princess in the first place. The people who ordered Ovelia's kidnapping were expecting people to come after her, so they paid some less than reputable folks to make sure that Ramza and the others didn't chase them for long. When the mercenaries see that Gafgarian is a part of the group, they realize that they should have asked for way more money since he's apparently famous for being dangerous. Once they've all been dealt with, Agrias figures that the only place the kidnappers could be taking Ovelia is to Bethla Garrison, so that's where the group starts to head. They don't end up having to go that far because they find Delilah and Ovelia at a waterfall surrounded by Hokutan Knights. They claim that they'll let Delilah live if he turns the princess over to them, but he's pretty sure that they'll kill both him and Ovelia if he does that, so he refuses. They claim that he's lying, but once Ovelia sees Agrius, they decide to stop wasting time with the lies and reveal that Gafgarian has been working with them all along. Their job was to kidnap the princess and kill everyone who saw them do it. They want her out of the way because she's the rightful heir to the throne and a hindrance to Larg getting the seat. Delilah taking her before they could do their job was an unexpected problem, since they were planning on blaming her death on Goltana. Delilah's pretty sure that Ramza's brother Dice Dog had something to do with making this plan, since he's still working with Larg. Gafgarian assumed that Ramza would go along with him, but he clearly guessed wrong because Ramza teams up with Delilah to deal with Gafgarian and his knights, which forces the mercenary to retreat since dying's not at the top of his priority list. When the battle's done, Delilah tries to convince Ramza and Agrius to leave the princess with him since she'll be safer. Now that they've made an enemy of the Hokutan, they will be hunting Ramza's group non-stop, and it's only a matter of time before they catch them and kill them all. Since it was Larg's plan, the royal family is clearly not on Ramza's side, and Goltana will probably execute Ramza's group just to avoid making it look like he really did go after the princess. So they don't have many safe places to go. Delilah claims that he does, but he can't tell Ramza how or what he's working on. He's not looking to fight Ramza right now though, so he agrees to let him keep the princess for now. Agrius is grateful for Ramza's help since he's basically just made himself the enemy of one of the most powerful men in Ivalice. And while what Delilah said about not having any allies is mostly true, Agrius thinks that they can ask Cardinal Draclaw for help. The Globados Church has a lot of authority, even enough to make Prince Larg not want to make an enemy out of them, so heading to Lionel Castle and talking to the Cardinal may be their best chance to avoid death. On the way there, they pass through a city where a man named Mustadio is being chased by some shady-looking people. They want something that he has, and their leader, a man named Rudvik, has kidnapped Mustadio's father as a means of guaranteeing that he hands it over. He's pretty sure that the man will kill both of them once he gets what he wants, so he's not exactly willing to hand it over. Lucky for him, Ramza and his friends see him and decide to help him out by murdering Rudvik's men. Mustadio thanks Agrius and Ramza for their help and lets them know that the men they killed were from the Bart Company. They're known around Ivalice as importers of goods, but they're really a very big crime syndicate that dabbles in everything from smuggling to slave trading. They're all around bad people, so he doesn't think Ramza should lose any sleep over the ones he killed. Mustadio is a mechanic, one of the people who study the lost civilization that supposedly exists under Gaug the Machine City. Back in the days of Saint Ajora, technology was more advanced than in the present day. There were flying airships and human robots that walked around the town performing jobs that regular people didn't want to do. As time passed, the technology was lost, and most people stopped believing that it existed at all, except for the people who actually explored Gaug and have seen the broken machines and airships that are buried under the city. The mechanics are working to restore that old technology. That's where Mustadio got his gun from. It shoots out regular gunpowder-fueled bullets, but from what he's heard, there are some that can actually be loaded with magic. That's not why the Bart Company are after him, but he doesn't feel comfortable telling Ramza the particulars of what he found just yet. He did hear that Ramza was going to see the Cardinal and he wants to tag along. Draclaw was a hero in the 50-Year War, and a lot of people respect him. That means he could probably make the Bart Company release Mustadio's dad, but he'd never meet with some random mechanic. If Ramza lets him tag along, he may get to ask the man for help. Agrius doesn't want to bring him since he won't say why he's being hunted, but Ovelia decides to let him tag along anyway. So with their new member in tow, they get back on the road to Lionel Castle. While Ramza and the others are making their way to the Cardinal, over at Egros Castle, Dice Dog is giving Gafgarian the go-ahead to do whatever it takes to get Ovelia, and kill everyone else who's blocking that goal, including his own brother. Gafgarian isn't all that fond of fighting the church if they decide to defend the princess, but Dice Dog has a plan if it comes to that. It turns out that Dice Dog had hired some other people to kidnap the princess at Orban Monastery, but Delilah had killed them and took her himself. Not even Dice Dog knows who he's working for, but it's clear that they're trying to stop his plans. That's not important at the moment. All that matters is getting Ovelia, so he sends Gafgarian off to get back on the hunt. When Ramza and the others make it to the Cardinal and tell him their story, he immediately agrees to help expose Prince Larg's plan and keep the princess safe, and he's willing to let Agrius and Ovelia stay in the castle until everything's been taken care of. He's even willing to send troops to Gaug to deal with the Bart Company for Mustadio, but he does want to know why they're after him and his father. Mustadio says that he can't tell him, but the Cardinal is pretty sure that he already knows. Mustadio and his father must have found one of the holy stones while they were sifting through the wreckage of Gaug. Draclaw knows this because he has one of the stones too. The stones are a part of an old religious tale called the Zodiac Brave story that may or may not be true. A long time ago, 12 warriors fought against the Lucavi, who were very powerful demons that ruled the world. The 12 managed to seal the Lucavi away in another dimension, freeing the world from their control. Each warrior carried a crystal with a zodiac sign carved into it, and that made people start calling them the Zodiac Braves. Their leader was a man named Saint Ajora, and according to the legend, every time the world is in danger, the Braves and Ajora show up and save it. The zodiac crystals are called the Holy Stones by the church, and the one that the Cardinal has is one of the stones that were used by the actual Braves of the stories. The stones are supposed to hold power greater than the Lucavi wielded, which is why anyone who knows about them would do anything to get their hands on one. Since the Cardinal already knew the truth, Mustadio admits that he did find one under Gaug, and every time it gets around the broken machines, they start to make noise like they're coming alive. Rudvik wants the stone so he can use it to make weapons, and since the last thing the group of criminals needs are stronger weapons, Mustadio's father told him to never give them the stone. So they kidnapped him to try and force Mustadio to hand it over anyway. Dracula promises that his men will save Mustadio's father, and since the princess is safe, Ramza decides to go to Gaug with him to help Mustadio save his dad, and to keep a crazy man from getting his hands on a rock that has the power of a god. When Mustadio and Ramza get to Gaug, it is pretty clear that something is wrong. There are no members of the Bark Company anywhere, but it doesn't look like there's been a fight, which it would have been if the Cardinal soldiers had shown up like they were supposed to. Mustadio decides to look around for his father and tells Ramza where to meet up with him a little bit later. It takes a while, but Mustadio finally shows up, but he doesn't show up to the meeting spot alone. Rudvik and some of his men captured him and brought him and his father there to force him to tell them where the stone is. Since he doesn't really have a choice now, he tells them and Ramza gets it and hands it over. Now that he has the stone and he's pretty confident that Ramza and Mustadio are about to die, Rudvik lets slip that he was after the stone for Cardinal Draculaw before he leaves. After taking down his men and saving Mustadio's father, the mechanic reveals that the stone he gave to Rudvik was a fake, one that he made just in case he had to turn it over, and he still has the real one in his pocket. That's great for him, but since the Cardinal wasn't exactly being honest with them, Ramza is positive that Agrius and Ovelia are not safe with him. If he's hunting for the Zodiac Stones, him and the church may very well be trying to use the stones in the legend of the Zodiac Braves to make the church into the new ruling body of Ivalice, since the Lion War has made everything unstable, which means that Ovelia would be in just as much danger in the hands of the church as she would be if Galtana or Larg got her. Since they helped him out, Mustadio agrees to help Ramza save Ovelia and Agrius, but he's pretty sure they won't be able to take the same route back to Lionel Castle that they did before, since the Cardinal's men will likely be watching for Ramza, so they hop on a ship so they can try and sneak around the back of the castle. That turns out to be a good idea, because none of the Lionel soldiers are in the trade city that they passed through, but Delilah just so happens to be there, and he warns Ramza that worrying about the princess and holy stones might not be all that good for his health. Things are about to get very dangerous, and the Lion War is the least important part of it. He knows a lot more than he's telling Ramza, obviously, but he leaves without telling him anything of substance. While Ramza is making his way back to Lionel Castle, Rudvik and Gafgarian have both made it to see the Cardinal. He's planning on handing the princess over to Dice Dark since he had already agreed to do just that, once he's let Gafgarian use her as bait to lead both Ramza and Mustadio into a trap so Gafgarian can kill them and take the stone. He heads off to set up the trap, but as for Rudvik, since he got tricked into turning over a fake stone, the Cardinal kills him. While racing back to the castle, Ramza runs right into Agrius, who's being chased by some knights from Lionel Castle. She had escaped after she heard that the Cardinal was working with Prince Larg, but the princess got captured again, and they're taking her to the Golgorand execution site at that very moment. So Agrius and Ramza finish off her attackers and rush over to the site to stop the princess from getting beheaded. Turns out the princess was never taken to the site at all, and this was the trap that Gafgarian had set up for Ramza. It doesn't work, and instead of dying, Gafgarian runs away again, so Ramza heads back to Lionel Castle. It turns out that Delilah was working with the Cardinal, which is something Ovelia finds out when he's the one who brings her food to her prison. But she still doesn't know what him and his group want with her since they aren't taking her to Larg at all. Whatever they're planning, she'll have to go along with it if she doesn't want to die. Delilah was actually going to explain part of the plan to her, but the Cardinal and one of the church's high-ranking knights named Vormov comes in and reveals that Ovelia isn't actually the original princess at all. The real princess died a long time ago, and some politicians who hadn't liked the original royals killed a few princes in a way that looked like natural causes, then had Ovelia get adopted as the new princess since they didn't think the king was healthy enough to have another son, something that they turned out to be very wrong about. Granted, not everyone is sure that Ornas is actually the old king's biological son. Larg may have pulled some strings to make the king think he'd had a baby with Larg's sister just so he could be in a position to take power. Ovelia doesn't believe him, but whether she was the real princess or not is irrelevant when it comes to the Cardinal and Vormov's plan. People think she's a legitimate heir to the throne, and they want to put her there under the control of the church, making them the new rulers of Ivalice instead of either Larg or Goltana. When Ramza and Agrias make it to the castle, Gafgarian attacks them again, and this time Ramza finally kills the man. With him out of the way, they head inside to face the Cardinal. The princess has already been sent to Zeltenia, and the Cardinal has no intention of letting Ramza go after her while he holds the Holy Stone, because he knows what they can really do, and he proves it by transforming himself into a Lucavi. Letting the demon use his body doesn't give it access to its full power, so Ramza and his group are able to kill the thing and add another Holy Stone to their collection. Over at Zeltenia, since Delilah was the one who saved Ovelia from Larg, he gets to meet with Goltana and his most important allies. Delilah claims to be one of Baron Grimm's Black Sheep Knights, but the Baron died a month ago in a battle that wiped out his entire Black Sheep squad. Delilah is obviously lying, but since none of Goltana's allies knew every member of the squad, they don't have any way to confirm Delilah's identity, and since he did bring the princess, they assume he's telling the truth. Delilah also brought a prisoner from the group who had kidnapped the princess for Larg. The plan was to frame Goltana for the kidnapping to keep him from taking over Lassalia, and they set the plan up with one of Goltana's top men who wanted to join Larg. After making Delilah promise to not let him get executed, the prisoner snitches on one of the men in that very room, and since treason is punishable by death, Delilah cuts the man down. After what he's seen, Delilah thinks Goltana should take his Nantan Knights to Lassalia right away before they blame him for what happened, which would turn more people against him. And instead of playing things slowly, they need to get rid of Oranos and the Queen and put Ovelia on the throne right away. Goltana takes his advice and heads to Lassalia with his army. They lock the queen away in Bethla Garrison and pronounce Ovelia the new ruler of Ivalice. However, Larg claims that Oranos is the rightful heir and crowns him king. But since he's so young, Larg acts as the true leader until Oranos is old enough to do the job himself. So acting on Oranos' behalf, Larg sends the Hokutan to Bethla Garrison to rescue the queen, and Goltana sends a large contingent of Nantan Knights to keep them out, which is where the Lion War officially begins. The Lion War has caused a lot of death on both sides, and even more people are injured. Food storages are low, and the drought has caused a lot of refugees to come to Lassalia, which is causing Larg a lot of problems. That's good for Goltana, but Orlando is pretty sure that it's only a matter of time before the same happens to them. He thinks it's about time that they start talking peace, but Goltana has no plans on doing that no matter how bad things get for the common people. Orlando is not happy about that, but there's nothing he can do about that since he's not in charge. While that's going on, Ramza is heading for Lassalia to let his brother Zalbag know that someone behind the scenes is manipulating everyone, and they're probably doing it for a very unpleasant reason. On the way to see his brother, Ramza runs into a man named Olan who accidentally wandered into a group of thieves' hideout, and he's in the process of getting murdered, so Ramza does his usual hero thing and saves him. When the fighting's done and Ramza introduces himself, Olan is surprised to hear that he's a Beowulf since most of that family are kinda dicks, but he's glad that he ran into the one that's not. He's not heading to Lassalia though, so he and Ramza go their separate ways, although Olan is pretty sure that they'll meet again. In Lassalia, Zalbag's not all that interested in Ramza's conspiracy theories, but he is surprised that Ramza thinks Dystar kidnapped the princess. The two of them start arguing, but they're interrupted when one of Zalbag's knights comes in claiming that Thunder God Sid and his troops have broken through the Dagula Pass. That's a pretty big deal since they didn't know his forces were anywhere near the pass, so Zalbag leaves Ramza to go and deal with this new problem, and Ramza decides to go ahead and leave the castle. He was planning on leaving without telling Alma, but she sees him trying to sneak out of the back, so he has to talk to his sister. She's surprised to hear that Delilah is alive and helped kidnap the princess. Ramza had thought he was working for Goltana, but he thinks he's involved with a third party instead. Unlike Zalbag, Alma believes Ramza about Dystar, and since Ramza is fighting against him, she wants to go with him. His life isn't exactly easy, so he doesn't want to bring her along, but their discussion is cut short when Zalmo, a heretic hunter from the church, shows up. Ramza has been branded a heretic and is required to stand trial for killing the cardinal and stealing the holy stones. Since their version of a trial is similar to the way they tried to get witches to confess in Salem, whether Ramza is found guilty or innocent, he'll still get executed, so Alma wants him to run. That makes Zalmo attack, but Ramza beats him, so he runs away. Ramza has no idea how the man found out about the Holy Stone, but he's pretty sure it has something to do with whoever Delilah is working for. Alma has actually seen one of the Holy Stones herself, and she'll tell Ramza where it is if he agrees to take her with him. Since she's probably been labeled a heretic too since she helped fight off Zalmo, and he doesn't exactly trust Dystar to keep her safe, Ramza agrees to bring her. Since he agrees to bring her, she lets him know that she saw one of the stones at the Orban Monastery, so it's time to head back there to retrieve it. Alma wasn't the only person who had seen the stone at the monastery, because when she and Ramza get there, the place has already been attacked. A lot of the people are dead, and Simon, the old man who leads the monastery, is badly injured. He's still alive though, and he lets Ramza know that they've had the holy stone at the monastery since Princess Ovelia was brought there, as a sign of proof that she was a part of the royal family. The whole situation is so dangerous that he doesn't think Ramza should get involved, but he's already in way too deep to just run off and hide. The high priest and his people are trying to regain power by weakening both Larg and Goltana's military, as well as how the general public view the royal family. Once the people are tired of the fighting and desperate for a savior, the church will send out their Zodiac Braves to play the role of hero and get the people to follow the church. Ramza's gonna go and try to stop them from getting the Virgo stone, and he wants Alma to take care of Simon while he's gone. He leaves the 2 Zodiac stones with her just in case he doesn't make it out, before he heads deeper into the monastery. The church has sent a lot of people led by a man named Islud and another man that Ramza ran into a long time ago, Wigraf. Islud thinks that Ramza should join them like Delilah did since he's working against his brothers too, but he doesn't seem to know about the demonic power of the so-called Holy Stones, or that the Cardinal turned into a monster. Once it's been made clear that Ramza won't join him, and that Islud isn't strong enough to beat Ramza in a fight, he retreats and takes Alma with him as a hostage while leaving Wigraf to deal with Ramza. The man wanted the chance to get revenge on Ramza for killing his sister anyway, so he's more than happy to do it. Unfortunately for him, Ramza is stronger than he is, and he wounds him so badly that he can't escape with Islud. While he's dying from his injuries, the Zodiac Stone that he's holding starts to talk to him, and it offers him immortality if he gives it his body. Since he really didn't want to die, he agrees, and his body is merged with the demon Ivalice. Ramza wants to fight him, but since Wigraf only just got his new powers, he teleports away to learn more about what his new form can do before he finally kills Ramza. Simon comes crawling out of the building and he hands Ramza a book written by Germanic, one of Saint Ajora's disciples. The book had been lost, but Simon found it, and it explains the true history of the Zodiac Braves and proves that the church's religion is a crock of crap. He thinks Ramza can use the book to discredit the church and make them give his sister back, but he won't get to see it because he dies from his injuries. With the book in hand, Ramza heads off to try and track down Islud so he can hopefully save his sister. The church clearly knew that Ramza had gotten the Germanic scriptures, because as soon as he leaves the Orban monastery, a weird-looking wizard comes to him telling him to bring the book to the Rylvain's castle if he ever wants to see his sister alive again. Since he doesn't have much of a choice, he starts heading to the meeting site. The path to the castle isn't exactly clear since Ramza has a pretty big price on his head, and some soldiers have gotten tired of fighting in the Lion War, and they think that the reward for killing a heretic would make things easier for them. The problem is, killing Ramza isn't easy and the people who try end up dead. Just like he had promised, Olan runs into Ramza again, and it turns out that he's a part of Goltana's Nantan Knights. He's been sent out to hunt deserters, so he has no interest in fighting Ramza. Ramza's brother's men are a different story, however, and since they aren't that far away, Olan thinks that it's in Ramza's best interest to get away from there. Ramza agrees, but before he leaves, he tells Olan to let him know if he comes across the Nantan Knight Orlandu, since he was Ramza's dad's old friend, and may be more interested in making peace than the rest of the knights. As luck would have it, Orlandu is Olan's father-in-law, so he'll definitely see the man again, and if he finds out that the church is doing some heinous stuff, he'll be more than willing to turn his sword toward them. And since he's one of the deadliest warriors in Ivalice, that would mean a lot. They think that the high priest is plotting something, but they don't have any proof. If it wasn't for the fact that Ramza needs the Germanic scriptures to save his sister, he would have told Olan about it, but since saving his sister is more important than stopping the war, he says his goodbyes to Olan and heads on. The strange wizard who had brought Ramza the message is named Malik, and he had never planned on letting Ramza reach the castle. He set up an ambush so he could kill the man and take the scriptures for his own master. His sister Rafa doesn't want to be used as a tool of murder anymore, and she wants her brother to escape with her. He feels more loyalty to their master since he saved them after their parents were killed during the 50-year war. But Rafa is pretty sure that Grand Duke Barrington took advantage of the war and used it as an excuse to burn their village and turn them into willing slaves, all because of their special magic. Malik doesn't believe her about that, so he's not going to turn on the man. With or without her brother, Rafa is done, and to prove it, she warns Ramza about the ambush and helps him force her brother to retreat. With her brother gone, Rafa gives Ramza a heads up about what he'll face when he goes after his sister, and who the man is that her brother is working for. Barrington wants to be king, and he's known for making weapons and training wizards, so he'll be very well defended. Malik sends Ramza a message by talking through a frog, which is a pretty cool power, and tells him to get to Rylvain's castle faster than gonna kill his sister, and if Rafa doesn't come with them, they'll still kill her. Since neither of them have a choice, they race off to the castle. When they get there, Barrington is meeting with Wigraf and Vormov in an attempt to get them to work with him to overthrow both Larg and Goltana. The man is very well informed when it comes to the Zodiac Stones and the power that they hold. He also knows why Vormov is hunting Ramza. Vormov tries to play ignorant, but it turns out that Barrington learned the truth from Vormov's son Islud after he took the 2 stones from him that Islud took from Ramza's sister. Vormov isn't happy about that, but he's still not willing to work with Barrington. The man threatens to expose the church's corruption if they don't, and he'll use the Germanic scriptures to do it. Vormov doesn't take too kindly to threats, so he sends Wiglaf out to deal with Ramza, and he uses the Zodiac Stone's power to deal with everyone in the room. Barrington sees what's about to happen and he runs away while his men get slaughtered. Ramza and Rafa force Malik to retreat again, and this time Rafa chases after her brother to try and make him run away with her while Ramza heads into the castle to save Alma. The castle is in total chaos. Vormov and Wiglaf are wreaking so much havoc that one of the knights feels bad about leaving Alma locked in a cell with no means of escape, so he lets her out before he dies, giving her at least a small chance to live. While she's looking for a way out, Ramza comes face to face with Wiglaf, who seems to have a completely different personality after his resurrection. He doesn't even care about his sister's death anymore, and instead just wants to kill people and cause chaos. That doesn't change the fact that Ramza will have to go through him to save his sister, so the two fight and Ramza forces him to teleport away. He changes his mind mid-retreat and decides to turn into Ivalice to deal with Ramza once and for all. Despite having the power of a Lucavi, Wiglaf dies, letting Ramza collect another Zodiac Stone before he continues his hunt through the castle. Alma makes it to the room where Vormov had first started his attack, and she sees that he didn't even spare his son. Islud finally realizes that Ramza was right about the stones, just a little bit too late. But he gives Alma the stone that he has and tells her to make her brother warn everyone that if they don't stop fighting and work together against the new Zodiac Braves, everyone's gonna die. Alma takes the stone and heads off to do just that, but unfortunately for her, Vormov finds her first. He senses Wiglaf's death, which makes him realize just how dangerous Ramza really is. He gets ready to kill Alma, but his Virgo stone resonates with her, marking her as the person that he had been hunting for. So instead of killing her, he knocks her out and takes her with him, not noticing that Islud's stone fell out of her pocket when he grabbed her. Barrington had run to the roof of the castle to avoid getting murdered by Vormov, but Rafa followed him so she could finally get revenge on him for killing her parents. Unfortunately for her, she brought a knife to a gunfight, so the odds of her winning are pretty much zero. Barrington knows this, and like a typical movie villain, he gloats about how nothing will happen to him despite all of the things he's done to her and her family. Malik overhears him admitting to everything that Rafa had accused him of, so when he goes to shoot her, Malik pushes her out of the way and takes the hit himself. Ramza hears the commotion and comes to see what happened, but he can't exactly help while Barrington has a gun pointed at Rafa. Malik has the stones that they took from Alma in his pocket, so Barrington tells Rafa to bring them to him. Before she can comply, Marquis Elmdor and 2 very strong women show up and toss Barrington off the roof of the castle, before demanding that Rafa turn the stones over to them. Elmdor had supposedly died in a battle not so long ago, so Ramza is pretty sure that the man is as human as Wiglaf was in the end, which means giving him more Zodiac Stones is not a good idea, so he attacks the Marquis instead, despite the fact that the man claims he'll make Vormov give Alma back if Ramza complies. After fighting with Ramza, the Marquis realizes why 2 of the Lucavi have lost to the man, and he decides to retreat so he can prepare to fight him on better terms at his own castle in Limberry. With the battle done and his sister still missing, Ramza gets ready to make his next move, but he stops when the Zodiac Stone Rafa has starts talking to her, in much the same way that Wiglaf's had. It senses how sad she is over her brother's death, and it activates bringing him back to life, which proves that the power in the stones isn't inherently bad. It all depends on the desires of the person using them. While leaving the castle, Ramza finds the stone that Alma dropped, and with Rafa and Malik both deciding to join him on his mission, he makes his way to Limberry Castle where he hopes to finally rescue his sister. After searching through all of the corpses in the castle and making sure that his sister wasn't one of them, Ramza learns from Malik that there were only 3 shrine knights from the church in the castle. Ramza killed Wiglaf, and Islud was dead, which means the 3rd knight probably took his sister. If he did, then he may have taken her to the holy city of Muron, since the shrine knights are following the high priest's orders. Even though the shrine knights are working for the priest, Ramza doubts he knows the true nature of the holy stones. Wiglaf hadn't known until Ivalice spoke to him, and Islud's body looked like he had been murdered by a Lucavi, so it's possible that only a handful of the church's followers understand what the stones are. That means there's a 4th group in the Lion War that's planning on using the Zodiac Brave story to dominate everyone, including the church, and Vormov may be the one running the show. With things getting more and more chaotic in the world, Ramza decides to head to Zeltinia to talk to Delilah. He wants to find out if the man knows what Vormov is up to. On the way to Zeltenia, Ramza and his ever-growing army of allies are attacked by a woman who wants to get revenge on him because she thinks he killed her brother Islud, and she's not exactly willing to buy the story that her brother got killed when Vormov turned into a Lukavi, especially since Vormov is her dad, which is something that Ramza hadn't expected. Ramza forces the woman to run away, but not before she vows to add her name to the never-ending list of people who want to kill him for one reason or another. When the battle's done, Ramza meets up with Delilah in a church, which is an odd place for a heretic to go, but the church is trying to kill him anyway, so it doesn't matter all that much. That doesn't mean he plans on making it easy for them, so instead of wasting time with small talk, he asks Delilah why the high priest sent him to work for Goltana, and the man actually answers the question. He was sent there to kill both Orlandu and Goltana. The church is trying to make the civilians who hate the government get angry enough to revolt, which will cause both Larg and Goltana to have to use their armies to stop the revolution. But between the deserters and the high body count of the war, they won't have enough soldiers to stop the civil unrest. Once they realize they only have one option left, they'll try to end the war by throwing all of their forces against each other in a final battle since neither side is willing to negotiate. The reason Delilah was perfectly fine with telling Ramza all of that is because the plan is pretty much complete and the two armies are getting ready to head to Bethla Garrison for the final battle at that very moment. A battle where both Larg and Goltana will be assassinated, along with the leaders of each major knight faction, including Ramza's brothers. Without the army's leaders, the war will stop and the church will guide everyone into the next dynasty. According to the church, the one major obstacle they still have is Ramza himself. That would make Delilah and Ramza enemies, except for the fact that he's not actually working for the church either, and according to him, he and Ramza are working toward the same goal. He proves that when Zalmo shows up to kill Ramza, and instead of joining in with the church's ally, he helps his old friend dispose of the heretic hunter for good. Once the fighting's over with, Ramza lets Delilah know that the other reason he came to Zeltenia was to find Orlandu to get his help in revealing the church's true motives. He has the proof Orlandu and Olan need to expose everything, and since he doesn't need the Germanic scriptures to free his sister now, he's willing to use them against the church. One of Delilah's assistants comes to let him know that Orlandu and Goltana are both on their way to Bethla Garrison, and Goltana is bringing Delilah's Black Sheep Knights with him. That means it's probably too late for Ramza to catch up to Orlandu to try and stop the unnecessary fighting. But he's still going to try, so he heads off, and Delilah lets him go because he knows what Ramza will do next, and it all falls in line with his own plans. While making his way to the garrison, Ramza runs into a shrine knight named Balk, who's put poison on the path of the Hokut Knights, a poison that'll make any soldier that breathes it in too sick to fight, which will give the Nanton Knights the upper hand when they get to the garrison. They'll take control of the fortress, making it easier for the assassins they have waiting there to finish off Goltana and Orlandu. Since Ramza doesn't want the war to end like that, he kills Balk and moves on. He may not be fast enough though, because the plan to make Goltana and Orlandu easier targets has already been put into motion. Someone planted some evidence to make it look like Orlandu was plotting to overthrow Goltana himself. The high priest delivered the evidence to Goltana personally, and even though Orlandu has worked for the man for 2 decades, he still has him arrested. Since he can't go to war without Orlandu's soldiers, Goltana puts Delilah in charge of them and gives him the title of Holy Knight while having no clue about how big of a mistake he's actually making. When Ramza gets to the garrison and asks to see Orlandu, the guards assume that him and his crew are the assassins who've been hired to kill Goltana, so they try to arrest them and end up dead. The armies are getting ready to collide, so Ramza rushes off to see what he can do, but on Larg's side, things have already gone bad. Balk's poison has crippled the prince and a lot of his knights, so Dystarg takes the opportunity to kill the man. Zalbag is confused by the betrayal, but Dystarg has been working with some people who prefer to have the Baol family in charge, and the only way they could do that is to have Larg removed while making it look like one of Goltana's assassins killed him. Since he can't exactly turn on his own brother, Zalbag agrees to help him pin the murder on Goltana. While all of this is going on, Ramza decides that the only way to interrupt the battle is to flood the field. So he kills the people guarding the dam, opens the floodgates, and uses the distraction to join up with Olan and rescue Orlandu from prison. The woman who had been working with Delilah helps, and since Goltana is planning on executing Orlandu in a day, he doesn't have a choice but to go with Ramza to deal with the high priest. Olan wants to come with him, but Orlandu sends him to Zeltenia so he can protect Ovelia. She's the rightful heir to the throne, and he wants to make sure that she lives to take it. Olan agrees and they all leave to carry out their mission. Delilah carries out his own and kills Goltana, as well as a fake Orlandu so the church will think that he's dead and hopefully won't be prepared for what he and Ramza do next. Things didn't work out as well as the high priest had hoped anyway, because the deaths of both Larg and Goltana weren't enough to make the armies give him authority, and the Lion War continues, despite the fact that the 2 lions who started it are both dead. Dystarg doesn't plan on stopping the war until King Ornos is recognized as the rightful ruler of Ivalice, but what he didn't realize was that the church knew that he was the one who killed Larg. He thinks that he's in a position where he can beat the church with pure numbers, but the Shrine Knight Raphael doesn't think the man realizes just how much they know about the moves he's made to get into his current position. He had started his whole campaign by poisoning his father so he could take over the Bayo family, which is not something that will go over well with most of his people, especially not with Zalbag. Raphael wasn't just sent to blackmail Dystarg though. He brought him a holy stone as a gift to buy his cooperation, since his loyalties are clearly for sale. He accepts the gift, but Zalbag heard the entire exchange, and he leaves to go and find out if his brother really did kill their father. While Zalbag's trying to figure out just how crazy his brother really is, Ramza makes it to Limberry Castle where he hopes to find his sister. But as soon as he gets there, he gets the same feeling that he had when he fought the last two Zodiac monsters. That's when Elmdor's two super strong female bodyguards show up and attack. They're just there to stall him while Elmdor and Vormov, who have both fully given their bodies to the Lucavi, discuss their plan to give themselves the ability to enter the mortal world without needing a host body. That involves bringing back a Lucavi known as the Bloody Angel. That creature can only be brought back in a very specific body in a very specific location. The body they needed is Ramza's sister, which they have, but they have to bring her to a place called Muron Death City, and they still haven't found a way to get there yet. Elmdor's people can only delay Ramza for a little while, but once he makes it into the castle, Elmdor sends Vormov off to find a way into the city, while he goes to deal with Ramza himself. He realizes really fast that he can't beat Ramza while he's keeping his human form, so he teleports to the underground cemetery where he transforms and uses his power to resurrect the dead. Islud's sister comes in right when he changes, which proves to her that what Ramza said about the stones was true, and Elmdor lets her know that her father is a Lucavi too, because unlike her and her brother, Vormov's body was a viable vessel for them. Now that she knows that Ramza wasn't lying, she joins him in bringing down Elmdor and adding another Zodiac stone to his collection. The Lucavi from the legends were supposed to be immortal, super powerful creatures, but since Ramza's managed to kill 3 of them and they haven't just used their power to crush everyone, it makes it seem like the stories have exaggerated a little bit, or the Lucavi can't use their full power for some reason. Islud's sister decides to give Ramza the Zodiac Stone that she had under the condition that he brings her with him, because she wants to know what her father is up to and why he gave Dystarg a stone. Ramza had no idea his brother had a stone, but now that he does, he wants to find out why too, so he gets ready to head off to find him. Following his stepfather's orders, Olan gets to Ovelia, but not without taking some pretty bad injuries in the process. Orlandu had been blamed for Gotana's death, so Olan tells her everything that happened in Bethla Garrison. He was about to let her know that Delita had killed Gotana, but Delita comes in and admits it himself. Ovelia isn't exactly happy about that, since she's starting to think that he's not really trying to clear the path for her to get the throne. But she does trust him a little bit, just not enough to avoid eavesdropping on his conversation with Olan. Delita plans on wiping out the Hokutan and killing the High Priest to clear the path for Ovelia to become queen, while getting rid of all of the people who have corrupted the world. Olan thinks he's crazy to try something so extreme, but the High Priest had expected something like that from him. So he told the woman who had been working with Delita to kill him if he ever looked like he was going to turn on them. Unfortunately for her, Delita kills her first. Zalbag's investigation proves that his brother had in fact killed their father with the same poison that had been used on Larg's army, so he heads to Egros Castle to confront his brother. Ramza gets there in time to see Zalbag attack Dystarg for what he's done, but before he can kill him, Dystarg's knights show up to capture Zalbag. Ramza backs him up and they kill Dystarg, but when he dies, the Zodiac Stone resurrects him as a Lucavi, and he kills Zalbag before Ramza puts him down. With the battle over, the last of the pure-blood sons of the Bayo family are gone, pretty much putting an end to the family's power and influence. Ramza's not exactly sad about that. All he cares about now is saving his sister. Delita likely won't have to kill the High Priest to complete his plan himself, because Vormov, Raphael, and Balk, who managed to survive his fight with Ramza, go and stab the priest themselves. They only work with him to get the Holy Stones, but since Ramza has most of them, there's no point in working with the man anymore. They agree to not finish him off if he tells them where the entrance to Morond is. Since he doesn't want to die, he lets them know that the Holy City's entrance is at the bottom of Orban Monastery, blocked off by a magical seal. He doesn't know how to break the seal, but he thinks the spell is in the Germanic scriptures, which means Vormov once again has a reason to hunt for Ramza. The High Priest told them what they wanted, but instead of keeping their word, they stab him in the back, literally, before they leave. Since Alma wasn't at Limberry, Ramza decides that the only other place that Vormov could have brought her was the Moron Temple, which is the home of the High Priest. He can't exactly walk in there since they want to kill him, so he fights his way inside and finally comes face to face with Vormov, who wants the Germanic scriptures in exchange for Ramza's sister. He hands it over, and once Rafael sees that the spell he needs is inside, they attack Ramza. They realize pretty fast that they can't beat him, so they run away after Vormov summons Zalbag's soul, forcing Ramza to fight his dead brother while Vormov and the others head off to open the way to the city of the dead. The High Priest isn't fully dead when Ramza stumbles across him, and before he dies, he tells Ramza where Vormov and the others went, so it's back to Orban Monastery, the place where this entire thing all began. Ramza gets there while Rafael is in the process of opening the way to the city of the dead. Ramza beats him, but he doesn't stop him from completing the spell and teleporting them all to Morond. He dies from his wounds, but not before he destroys the entrance to the place, making it almost impossible for Ramza to ever make it home. He'll cross that bridge when he gets to it. Alma is somewhere in the city, so he heads off to find her. After cutting his way through Shrine Knights and the monsters that they have working with them, Ramza finds Vormov while he's trying to draw the strongest Lucavi, Ultima, into Alma's body. It's not working though. It takes a lot of blood and death to resurrect Ultima, which is the whole reason Vormov and the other Lucavi were trying to throw the world into chaos. He thought enough people had died for the summoning to work, but since that doesn't seem to be the case, he transforms into his Lucavi form and tries to kill Ramza. When he loses the fight, he sacrifices himself to complete the ritual, letting Ultima take over Alma's body. The merger isn't complete though, so the Virgo stone that Alma was holding helps separate her from the Lucavi. Ultima still has enough power to survive without a host, but not enough to beat Ramza, who she recognizes as a descendant of the person who beat her the last time. In a last-ditch effort to take down her enemies, she blows herself up and seemingly takes Ramza, his sister, and everyone else with her. With all of Ivalice's major powers gone, Delita marries Ovelia and becomes king and brings peace to Ivalice. But Ovelia thinks that he plans on killing her too, so she stabs him. He doesn't die, but he does kill her for attacking him. Meanwhile, Olan catches sight of Ramza and Alma, who survive the fight with Ultima, and head off to start new lives somewhere else while the rest of Ivalice thinks they're dead. The story begins in Kugane when the Warrior of Light, that's you if you're new, comes in contact with Lena, a reporter for the Raven. She's been waiting around hoping to run into you at the behest of Alma. Alma wants you to help her find her father, so you follow her to her ship, the Prima Vista, to hear her story. The first surprise you run into is the fact that the ship is Garlean made. Again, if you're new, the Garleans are not your friends, to put it mildly. The second surprise is the fact that the ship is the home of the majestic Imperial Theater Company, so there are no soldiers aboard this massive warship, only actors, dancers, and other performers. Originally, Emperor Solus enjoyed the theater so much that he built the Prima Vista as a portable stage for him to watch shows on the move. With them gone, now the plays are censored in a fashion to where anyone who performs unapproved material tends to disappear. However, the leader of the troupe, Genomus, Alma's father, decided to hide political criticism in his plays. His current project, the Zodiac Brave story, any of you Final Fantasy Tactics fans will know this name, is a retelling of the Garlean fairy tale, but its secret meanings got past the censors, and it became so popular that the government couldn't get rid of it, so they made it taboo to do business with the troupe, instead causing them to go broke. While their story is interesting, it has nothing to do with why Alma and Lena were looking for you. But before you can ask them to get to the point, your old friend Sid shows up to help explain things to you. He and Genomus had been friends for years, and when he found out his daughter was looking for help, Sid recommended you. There aren't very many adventurers who would help an Imperial search for her father in Garlean territory, but Sid knows that you are less likely to judge people based off of their race than others, so he figured you would be willing to hear them out. He wasn't wrong, and you agreed to the job. Since you've agreed to join the search, Alma takes you further into the ship, telling you that her father had vanished while working on the follow-up to the Zodiac Brave story. The original story followed Delita, a commoner who became a hero and formed the kingdom of Ivalice, but Genomus discovered evidence of a second hero who truly led to Delita's rise in power. That was the story that he wanted to tell. This man had been Delita's best friend until his sister was murdered and they parted ways. Despite this man still helped Delita, yet history seems to have forgotten him. While the story is a fairy tale to some, Genomus has always believed it and Ivalice were real, even back when he and Sid were in school together. So when he was run out of Garlemald, he went to where he always believed the ruins of Ivalice were buried, beneath the Dalmasca Desert. Genomus found many strange artifacts in the desert, books, crystals, and a host of other things. He He believed the crystals he called auracite would be a major part of proving his theory. The auracite was supposedly gifts from the gods and filled with power. Genomics claimed they spoke to him, then he began to act strange, staying in his room alone and talking to himself. At least that's what Alma thought until the voices answered him and she heard. Her brother arrives in the middle of her speech and he's not happy about her getting outsiders involved in the search. The boy's name is Ramza and let's just say he's not a nice person. Fortunately, his sister is a bit smarter than he is and understands that they are foreigners who would never find their dad without a guide. Ramza would rather have Sid help them, but he can't until he's done dealing with Omega, a story that I'll cover another time. Instead, he vouches for you before heading out. Ramza apologizes, admitting that he's a bit on edge after his last trip into Rabanasta on his quest nearly got him killed. Despite the fact that the capital of Dalmasca has been turned into a death trap, Ramza is positive that his father's there, since his fascination with the legends of Ivalice has started with a tour of that very city. Sid heads off to deal with his own problems, and Ramza preps the ship to head back to Rabanasta. When you arrive in the ruins, Alma tries to head down with you, but Ramza stops her. The city is far too dangerous for her, and Genomics will never forgive him if something happened to her on his watch. The city was old, but during his studies, Genomics learned that Rabanasta was built atop an even older settlement that he believed to be Lasalia, the capital of Ivalice, and Ramza believes his father is there. You return to the shuttle to plan the expedition, never noticing the group of mercenaries waiting for Ramza. Seeing you makes them hesitate, but they still plan on proceeding with whatever they were going to do. You enter the royal city with Ramza and a few other hired hands and face off against some powerful enemies before riding a current in an underground waterway that drags you into the ruins of Lasalia. You face even stronger enemies within the ruins, and when the fighting's done, you find a strange stone as well as Ramza's father. He is shocked to see that the legendary Warrior of Light came to rescue him, but before the rescue is complete, a group of bounty hunters led by Bagamnon drop down and grab Genomics. They want the auracite, the stone that you just found. To save Ramza's father, your terrified reporter friend hands it over. True to their word, they let him go, but not before stealing his book. With nothing left to do, you all take Genomics and head back to the ship. Sid arrives shortly before Genomics finally regains consciousness, and he dives into an explanation on how auracite doesn't actually aid in allowing a person to get possessed by an icon like they thought, but instead steals the holder's soul, changes it, then puts it back in their body. That information will be useful, but that wasn't what Genomics was searching for. He discovered that Delita wasn't the sole hero of the Zodiac Brave story. There were actually two others, a brother and sister named Ramza and Alma, the names that he gave to his own children. The reason he knew the truth that no one else did was because it had been passed down through his family. The world knew him as Genomics, but his true name was Arsalam Durai. His ancestor wrote the Durai Papers, which documented the truth about Ivalice and the War of the Lions. Long ago, a man named Oran Durai met both Delita and Ramza. After Delita became king, Oran began to work with him. He believed that the people should know about Ramza's role in the war, and he wrote it all down. Sadly, when the church found out, they burned him at the stake. The Durai Papers were never published. All copies were sealed by the church, all but the one Genomics possessed. With it, he plans on exposing the truth and restoring his family's honor. To do that, he has to translate the book from High Evolution, an ancient language that hasn't been used in generations. Until the expedition, there had been little luck with translating the work, but the artifacts found in Rabanasta helped speed up the process. Unfortunately, the book that was stolen had everything that he had learned about the language. Despite this setback, he won't give up. He will spread the truth about Ivalice and his family no matter what, even if it kills him. And that means you're going to be along for the ride. When we last left off, Genomics' journal where he had been translating the Derived papers had been stolen by mercenaries, and he was working on finding another way to continue his research and restore his family's name. When you return to the Prima Vista, Alma informs you that Sid sent for an Archon from Charlian to help study the Aurosite, and they wanted you there to see what she'd found. The Archon's name is Makoto, and she's heard of you. I mean, at this point, who hasn't? The warrior light is practically at the center of everything. The piece of Aurosite that Makoto was studying that Genomics had found was called the Odious, and it was one of the shards that was used to aid Delita in his rise to power. Makoto starts to explain what she's learned, but she uses way too many smart people terms for any of us uneducated individuals to understand, so Sid has to dumb things down for us while revealing that Makoto, like you, has access to the Echo. What makes this Aurosite special is that unlike other crystals that only radiate elemental energies, it can store someone's will or their strong desires and make them real. Kind of like summoning a primal, only instead of needing a lot of crystals full of elemental ether to perform the summoning, Aurosite has the power to do it on its own. The man named Argoth that you fought in the ruins of Rabanastre was a manifestation produced by another special piece of Aurosite, the Duma, that you found after you destroyed the creature, although it was stolen along with Genomics' journal. The original Argoth, based on the Derived papers, was a weak, petty man who wanted to be powerful, and the Duma stored his will and turned it into the powerful beast that you faced. Alma begins to wonder if the Aurosite is dangerous, but her father says that the Ramza of the past also used Aurosite with no problems. Makoto gets the idea that maybe the Aurosite isn't natural at all, but is actually a man-made weapon that some people may have learned to use properly while others were corrupted by them. Sid wants to continue the discussion, but urgent business calls him away, so he leaves you in Makoto's hands. The next question that's asked is if Argoth's desires were in the Aurosite that you found in Rabanastre, whose desires are stored in the Odious? Makoto is a step ahead of you, and from what she's discovered, the Odious is empty, which is confusing to Alma since she heard voices coming from it. Ramza rudely dismisses his sister's questions, however, questioning not only her mental state but her loyalty to the family. The only thing that stops his outburst is the arrival of a Moogle. Apparently the Garleans had never seen a Moogle before, so they get to experience how annoying they are for the first time, and Mont Blanc is very annoying. He's a Moogle from Dalmasca, and although it is home to a lot of different races, since Moogles are nomads, there's no records of them being there. Mont Blanc wants to join the theater troupe, but Ramza is having none of it. Genomics is less of a prick than his son and lets Mont Blanc at least explain why he wants to join. He had seen a performance of the Zodiac Brave story, and from that moment on, he wanted to be a part of the troupe. Another Moogle, Hurdy, shows up and reveals that apparently Mont Blanc changes his dreams more than people change their underwear. The Moogles argue back and forth until Ramza snaps on him, calling Mont Blanc all kinds of names. I think the Bat Mole was the best one he came up with. However, calling him a coward seems to be a step too far, and Mont Blanc vows to go out and kill a beast so the troupe will accept him as a brave warrior fit to play the leading role in their next story. He leaves, and of course, you head off to save him from what will certainly be a gruesome death. Mont Blanc was really setting himself up to die because you find him heading into Rabanastre where he's attacked by red chocobos. You save him, which makes him break down and cry, saying his dreams will never come true since he's so weak. You and Lena give him some encouraging words that he completely misinterprets, but they perk him up well enough, and you head back to the Vista. You arrive just in time to see the crew on the verge of fighting the same mercenaries who attacked you in Rabanastre. Surprisingly, they aren't there to fight. They want your help finding their leader, Begamnon. To get you to at least hear them out, they return Genomics' journal and give up their weapons. Apparently, the Aurosite that Begamnon stole from you sought to refill its ether stores and probably absorb Begamnon's deepest desires, so to help with the search, Bwagi, one of Begamnon's men, tells you their story. 30 years ago, they were members of the Dalmascan army stationed in Nalbina Fortress. It was thought impervious, but when the 4th Legion took it, the loss of morale was the first step to the fall of Dalmasca. Begamnon was their captain, and knowing the fortress would fall, Prince Rossler gave them one last mission: to escort his sister, Princess Ashelia, to safety. Things went wrong, and she died in Begamnon's arms. Her last words told them that as long as a Dalmascan lived, the nation would too, so they had to survive. The story leads Makoto to believe that Begamnon's greatest desire would be to have the power to purge the invaders from his home. which, with the Auracite in tow, will turn him into a powerful monster. And if he's not found quickly, there may not be anyone powerful enough to stop him before he wreaks havoc on the surrounding lands. Sadly, even his allies have no idea where he may have gone, but there seems to be a new entry in the back of Geonomus' journal that had been added by Begamnon himself. It's written in Dalmascan, but the Mughals translate it. It says Ridorana, which is a place south of Rabanastre. It leads to a place called the Ridorana Cataract that many have tried to explore, but all have failed, dying in the process. The cataract is the only place out in Ridorana of any note other than the lighthouse, but before you head there, Geonomus wants to review his notes to see if there's a bit more information on the place. He finds that the lighthouse in Ridorana used to be manned to keep people from dying trying to go into the cataract. Even though it's no longer filled with soldiers, there's no telling what else might be in there. What's odd is nothing in the Zodiac Brave story mentions the place, but it could have had a different name all of those years ago. Ramsay did a bit more research and found that the Valnard Sea, where the lighthouse is, was mentioned a lot, but there were no records of the lighthouse or the cataract, which meant they probably didn't exist prior to Delilah's rise to power. He has a theory, but he won't be able to prove it without going to the lighthouse. The instant you arrive, something feels wrong, and you all split up to search for Begamnon. You find him muttering to himself, and he sees you all, even his allies, as Imperials. The Auracite has already taken control of him, and he attacks Lena, forcing you to strike him down. As he dies, the stone speaks to him, telling him to bond with it in exchange for power. He does, and transforms into a monster straight out of Resident Evil, and teleports away, prompting an urgent call from Ramsay to return to the ship. Sadly, there's no saving him now, but Geonomus doesn't want to leave the monster that he's become alive to cause problems in the future. Alma thinks that things are getting too dangerous to continue, but once again, Ramsay rudely shuts her down. As this story goes on, I hate that boy more and more. But he did find a path at the base of the lighthouse that leads to what he believes are the ruins of the clockwork city of Gog. It was the place where airships and all other kinds of technology was first designed. The location, like so many other things, had been lost with time, but Geonomus knew that because of the city's location it had to be built up toward the sky instead of out like most other places, so he had assumed that it was on an island somewhere, and the cataract had been formed after a massive explosion destroyed half of the city, forcing its inhabitants to flee. Garleans are in fact the descendants of the people who fled the city after the explosions, which explains their technological prowess and the people's natural love of the Zodiac Brave story. During the discussion, Wagi notices Alma's necklace. It was a gift from her mother, but it looks exactly like something that Begamnon always wore. Ramsay gets offended, acting like Wagi was implying that his sister was a thief just by asking a simple question, and for once his father chastises him about his apparent disdain for other races. He hangs his head in shame, although I doubt it's genuine, as you all prepare to head to the Ridorana Lighthouse and the Clockwork City of Gog. The lighthouse is incredibly dangerous, filled with powerful beasts that you have to fight your way past. Despite an untold amount of centuries passing, the city's technology still works. The transportation nodes send you through the place, but the city's defenses are still active as well. A massive robot known as Construct 7, which looks exactly like Worker 8 for you Final Fantasy Tactics fans, guards the uppermost reaches of the city, and he attacks you with the deadliest weapon of all, math. He has lasers too, but math is definitely his deadliest tool. After you deal with him, you run into Begamnon again. The Auracite makes his body turn into a massive dragon-like thing, and once you bring him down, you retrieve the Auracite that he stole. Ramsay also notices his necklace, and he mistakes it for his mother's. When he reaches to pick it up, it sparkles and he passes out. You bring him back to the ship, and while he's unconscious calling for his sister, the rest of you study the two necklaces. The stones in them are different, but they were clearly made by the same person. Makoto notices that even though the stones are shaped differently, they were cut from the very same crystal. The Mughals feel the power coming from the stones, although no one else does, and they know it to be Auracite. The necklace that Begamnon had was given to him by Prince Rosler and was meant to be returned to Princess Ashelia once they got her out of Navana. It seems like the different pieces of Auracite are guiding your group closer to Ivalice. The other pieces of Auracite had held the will of their previous owners, and Makoto gets the idea that maybe the previous owners of the Auracite and the necklaces simply wanted to return to Ivalice. The question now is, who were those owners? Ramsay awakes and his entire demeanor is changed. He starts talking about Ramsay Beov, his ancestor, and how he had wanted people to return to his homeland and uncover the truth behind its founding. And the reason the Auracite led you all to Lusalia and Gog was to see if you deserved to know the truth. He sounds so certain that he's right that Lena questions how does he know all of this, since nothing that you've uncovered even remotely would have led to that conclusion. Ramza quite politely asks that Lena trust him. The respectful way that he addresses her catches her off guard, and he's even nice to his sister. Mont Blanc mutters that he senses a disturbance in the ether. I'm not even going to explain that reference, you should already know it. But Ramza is obviously different. He touches the aura site and begins to glow before taking a seat, seemingly exhausted. Alma goes to check on him and he snaps at her. Of course, the change in personality was too good to last, and he's back to being an insufferable prick again. When you return to check on everyone, Lena thinks that something is wrong with Alma, but she doesn't want to talk about it around outsiders, so you follow her back to the Prima Vista. Genomus is surprised to see you return so soon, but when you reveal that Lena told you something was wrong with Alma, Ramza gives you a quick rundown. Alma's sick, but doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her. Physically, she's fine, so they think maybe the long journey is taking a toll on her. Alma comes out of her room at the sound of voices, but she collapses and Ramza helps her back to her chambers while Genomus discusses the next stage of the expedition. The two previous places you went, Lasalia and Gog, both appear in the Durai papers, and the discovery of each place is making it harder to deny the truth of the words, but Genomus' aim of having Oran Durai cleared of the accusations of the church and proving Ramza Bael's role in helping Delita become king is still not done. He has a location in mind that may hold clues to furthering his cause, but getting there safely is a bit tricky. He has the Mughals working on a solution, and Ramza not only praises their hard work, but thanks them for it. Lena's reporter senses start tingling because Ramza has been a jerk for too long to all of a sudden become a nice guy without being suspicious. Makoto seems to notice as well, but Genomus is only focused on his mission. The only way to clear his ancestor's name is to find evidence of Ramza Bael's role in Ivalice's history. That very thought led Genomus to discovering a struggle with a powerful, unknown force during the War of the Lions. The Lucavi, or the monsters that were born from the aura site, were what Ramza fought while the War of the Lions raged on around him. He and his allies fought them until they reached the Orban Monastery. It was the place where Princess Ovelia, the woman who Delita married, was raised, but it was also the place that housed the being who created the aura site, Ultima, the High Seraph. It is possible that the spell that was used by the Asians against you came from that very creature. Having seen how powerful that spell was, imagine how powerful Ultima herself might be. From Makoto's research, Ultima appearing on Heidelin at all shouldn't have been possible, so it's likely from a different dimension entirely, a lot like Omega. Sid arrives comparing Ultima to the creature that he's been dealing with. I swear I'm going to cover the story, guys. It is coming, don't worry. Makoto had requested something from Sid, but she'd expected a Mughal to deliver it, not for Sid to bring it personally. Lena's more interested in the location of the Orban Monastery, but Genomus has no idea where it is. The Durai papers, however, mention a place southeast of Rabanastre, where a monastery may be on the river Zashel. The name is not on any modern maps, but thanks to the Mughals, Ramza believes it's in Golmore. The problem is that the area you need to visit is in Vieira territory, and the bunny race murders almost anyone who trespasses on their land. Mughals' magic hid them for long enough for them to see ruins like those in Lasalia and Gog, but then they had to flee for their lives. The only hope of getting into that land is to recruit one of the Vieira who have abandoned their people's code and left their homeland, but the turmoil in the nation has made it difficult to find a recruit. Before boarding the ship, someone had asked Sid to deliver a message to you that Abanga was looking for you, and he hands over the device he had crafted for Makoto, although he didn't have a subject to test it on, so he doesn't know if it actually works. With his business done, he heads off. Makoto takes you to the side to tell you about the device and what she's discovered about Alma's condition. She believes the aura site is poisoning her. Alma had told Makoto of how she heard Genomus talking to the Odious long before he went to Rabanastre, but she doesn't think that's entirely true. She thinks the aura site showed her a vision that made her think her father was talking to it. The reason Makoto had thought the Odious was empty when she tested it was because it had already bound itself to Alma's deepest desires. The only reason she hasn't changed like Bagamnon is because her desires may not be as strong, as well as the presence of the other aura site on the ship. Makoto told Alma to destroy the necklace, but she wouldn't, and she begged her not to tell her father. So Makoto took other measures and designed a device that should lessen the effects of the Odious by amplifying the energy emitted from the Virgo aura site in Alma's mother's necklace. As usual, one of the Mughals interrupts you, claiming that a Bongan loitering around the airship landing is causing an uproar in the city, reminding you that Sid did say one was looking for you. The Bongan turns out to be Bwagi, and he needed to speak with you about something important. Alone. Of course, the Moogle refuses to leave, asking Bwagi for help getting through the Golmore jungle since he's so well traveled. Bwagi had come to get you to meet someone, and since you did help him with Bagamnon, he decides to bring both you and the Moogle. You board his ship and he takes you to Rabanastre. With Bagamnon gone, Bwagi and his friends joined the Dalmascan resistance. After Doma had won his freedom with a lot of help from you, of course, Dalmasca had tried its hand and was crushed by the 4th Legion. The resistance leaders were publicly executed, but that only made the survivors fight harder. There are a number of separate factions fighting, and Bwagi and his crew joined a group called Lentz Tyr. When their commander heard that Bwagi knew you, she insisted that he introduce you. Their commander is a Viera named Fran, and yes, it is the Fran from Final Fantasy XII, and she knows of the place that you want to go. It is sacred to her people, yet you travel with Garleans, so she has very little reason to help you. If you want her to help, then she wants you to go to your allies and get them to provide resources and men to aid in their fight with the Garleans. Because of your reputation, you are more likely to get assistance than an outsider. If you do this, Fran will personally guide you to Orban, you and your Garlean allies. With the negotiations done, Bwagi takes you back to Kugane so you can get to work on fulfilling your end of the deal. Before you head off to handle your task, you head back to the Prima Vista to inform your allies of what's happened. Genomus is well versed in the history of the Viera, and he gives you a rundown. They have been hidden in the forest for centuries with a strict code of avoiding contact with outsiders. However, some Viera break this rule and move to live among outsiders in cities. Fran is one of these. Now that your friends know what's going on, you give Hancock at the Aldenard Trading Company a call. He calls you back pretty fast with a response from his superiors, so you take Bwagi and Lena to see what Hancock has to say. Yugiri and Tataru also show up with responses to your request for aid from Hien of Doma, as well as the leaders of the Eorzean Alliance. Unfortunately, the trading company cannot provide you with funding because it would ruin their position of neutrality and would hurt their profits. The Alliance is also unwilling to provide assistance. Hien is willing, but since Dalmasca's last attempt at revolution ended in a terrible failure that left the resistance a scattered mass of small groups, until they can prove that they can fight as one, he won't risk his people. Bwagi is not upset. In fact, he knew that the negotiations wouldn't gain them anything. It was all done to prove a point to their leader. Fran wanted to show the princess what she was getting herself into with the resistance, and the refusals would teach her a valuable lesson. He leaves to report to Fran, and you return to the Prima Vista to plan for another way to the monastery since you couldn't fulfill Fran's requests. Fran, however, shows up with Bwagi to interrupt your discussion. They should really start locking their doors if they don't want random people just wandering into their ship. While you failed to meet any of her demands, the leader of Lentz Tyr decided to send Fran to aid you since you did at least try. Fran shows you on a map where you want to go, and Ramza goes to plot out the course, but Alma comes out of a room wanting to know what's going on. When she finds out, she wants to come with you because the Highest Seraph has been talking to her through the odious aura site. She and Makoto have a plan to deal with it, but even Genomus is against putting her in danger. Timid little Alma snaps at her father, questioning his true motives. Does he want to clear his ancestor's name, or is he hunting the aura site so he can get the power to resurrect his wife? Alma believes that she can learn how the aura site works from the Highest Seraph, and they can do just that. Ultima told Alma to come free her from her prison, and she will show them how to use it. Still, Ramza and Genomus refuse, prompting Ultima to reveal that she already has control of Alma. Makoto uses her device to separate Alma from the aura site, but a portal opens, snatching her away before it can work. Makoto gives it to you, and you all rush off to Golmore Jungle. As soon as you arrive, Alma appears before you, floating like a ghost from a low-budget horror movie, the Odious hovering above her. Another portal opens to yank her away as she reaches for her brother, but this time he reaches inside and pulls his sister free. The Warrior of Light tosses him Makoto's device, and he blasts the portal with it, causing it to vanish. A voice calls out from somewhere far away, calling for an ancient covenant to be fulfilled and a vessel to be given before another portal appears and swallows Ramza. Needing to regroup, Bwagi scoops up Alma and you all head back to the Prima Vista, but not before you see an armored spirit that asks if you have the courage to face true evil before it disappears. The abduction of Ramza has everyone on edge. Fran deduces that since a magic rift had to be made to take Ramza, then Ultima is still imprisoned, but it only took a piece of aura sight for the creature to reach out and touch them, meaning that you're all in serious trouble. Genomics has no idea what to do, and Makoto blames herself, although her device did separate Alma from the aura site as it was supposed to. Breaking down the High Seraph's words, Fran wonders if Genomics' family was responsible for summoning Ultima in the first place, but Genomics denies it. Records of Ultima were around long before the earliest mention of Ivalice. Still, for some reason Ultima and Genomics' family are connected. The aura sight on Alma's necklace begins to pulse and the echo takes over you, showing you a vision of Delita and Oron. Oron was explaining that Ramza had given up his body and stored his soul in the aura sight despite the fact that the War of Lions had been won. Knowing that he owes his crown to his friend, Delita prepares to march his legion onto Orban, but Oron stops him. Ajora, the first of the Zodiac Braves, was not a hero as the ancient stories proclaimed him to be, but instead he was a traitor. He had turned on Hydaelyn for money and power and summoned a powerful creature from the abyss, and only a warrior of light has the power to stand against it. Yet Ramza failed to beat it, despite wielding the blessing of Hydaelyn, and if the warrior of light couldn't do it, then ordinary soldiers would serve no purpose. Alma Beov joins them, delivering Ramza's final message. He wanted all records of him removed from history. When it was certain that they couldn't win, he had decided to do the same thing that Hydaelyn had done centuries before when Ultima was first summoned and imprison it. Ramza sacrificed his own body to seal Ultima away, but he knew that if people knew what he'd done, they'd seek the aura sight's power and accidentally release the thing again. Delita wants his friend to be honored for what he'd done, but he understands. Alma shows him the aura sight that holds Ramza's soul, and Delita sees a vision of his friend telling him to be a good king. The images of the same man you saw in Goldmoor Jungle. Delita has the aura sight made into 2 necklaces under the assumption that they will guide the heroes of a new era to Ramza to hopefully finish what he started, per Ramza's request. Delita tries to get Oron to join his court, but he doesn't want the church to come down on him when they come after him. Plus, he's written the truth about Ramza down, as well as the real story of their beloved Saint Ajora, and he doubts the church will be happy about it. Delita is willing to hide one of the copies of the book so later generations will have it, but when the church finds out that Oron wrote it, they won't simply arrest him. He will be branded a heretic and executed. Oron and Alma share a look, and she touches her belly, letting him know that she's pregnant, and the vision ends. Genomics is shocked to learn that his ancestor was responsible for Ramza's removal from history, and the person that Ultima wanted wasn't Genomics or his kin, but you, the successor to the warrior of light who imprisoned her. Alma awakens and confirms that Ultima was using them to lure you to her. She wants your body to be her next vessel, adding her substantial power to the blessing of Hydaelyn that flows through you, making her unstoppable. The knowledge prompts Fran to admit that her first reason for tagging along was to steal a piece of aura sight and use it to destroy the Garleans. Now she just wants to join you in your fight to save Ramza. She wants to ensure that the High Seraph isn't freed because it would mean terrible things for her people in Goldmoor. No one in their right mind would turn down having Fran fight alongside them, so you all head off to Orban to save Ramza. The Mughals instantly sense that the ether is corrupted in the area, and Fran warns you to be careful. Even her people don't venture into the ruins. Inside, you face named warriors who would be familiar as members of Ramza Beov's own crew to those who played Final Fantasy Tactics and experienced the War of Lions firsthand. The first is Mustadio Bonanza, a sniper and an engineer whose precise attacks can take you all down from afar. Next, you face Agrius Oaks, a holy knight whose techniques will test your resolve. Finally, you face Thunder God Cid, a powerful warrior wielding the mystical blade Excalibur, well as a bunch of other swords, and powers that only the strongest can overcome. Each of these warriors are manifestations of the aura sight here to see if you are worthy of completing Ramza's mission and putting an end to Ultima. And with their defeat, they send you further into the monastery until you come across Ultima herself. The creature is powerful, but Ramza's allies who you just fought show up to offer aid, allowing you to drag out a victory. With Ultima defeated, you find Ramza who wakes and is grateful for your aid. A vision of Ramza Beov appears to thank you for doing what he couldn't, as images of all of his allies who fell with him in the battle with Ultima appear behind him. They are finally able to rest in peace and head off to rejoin with Hydaelyn, but not before the spirit of Delita appears to apologize for not giving his friend a better place in history. The friends shake hands and vanish, leaving you all to ponder what you just saw as you return to the Prima Vista. Genomics, reunited with both of his children, apologizes for being so lost in his research that he lost sight of them, and he begs for their forgiveness. With their quest done, he plans to tell the story of how the forgotten hero Ramza and the Chronicler Oran Durai defeated the Angel of Blood Ultima and saved Ivalice before heading off on a quiet retreat to live out the rest of their days in peace. Just like his ancestor guided people with the Auracite pendants, Genomus will guide them with his plays. Meanwhile, in the city of Gaug, the 4th Legion has found the ruins, and amidst all the machinery and broken constructs, they find the still fully functioning Construct 7 that they intend to use to make even greater weapons of war to subdue their enemies. This concludes the story of the Return to Ivalice raid. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next story.